all the wisdom teachers across the world will tell us that along with multiplying our external material conveniences, if we don't simultaneously promote spiritual values, there will be an imbalance in the world. It's interesting, in the world today, we're increasing technologically. We're increasing in entertainment and conveniences. We're increasing in so many facilities, conveniences, and comforts. But the crucial question to ask is, are people happier? Thank you so much, everyone. It's really my honor to be with you this afternoon. It's my first visit to Australia. Just a little bit of the human story behind the monk in orange who's in front of you at the moment. I grew up in London. My parents are originally from India, but they came over to London in the 70s to kind of start a new chapter of life. And I was born in 1981, so now you can figure out how old I am. And I guess from a young age, I grew up very fortunately with abundance, with prosperity, with what any child could ever need and want for their growth. And so I was very privileged in many ways. But I guess as I was growing up, I was seeing a world in which people had everything, but sometimes seemed to be missing something within themselves. One English writer said, smiling faces, but maybe crying hearts sometimes. And so I perceived some of that, and at a young age, I began to question what more there could be to life than the basic goals that we're told to pursue. At the age of about 15, I began reading different spiritual books of wisdom. And by the time I was 18, I got admission to university. So I studied at University College London. I wanted to study philosophy, but was convinced to do something that would get me a proper job. And so I ended up studying computer science and management. But through my university years, my spiritual hunger was growing. And by the time I was 21 and I graduated, I felt as though I needed to disconnect from the world to kind of explore my inner calling. And at the age of 21, I journeyed to India, and I spent 6 months traveling, meeting eminent spiritual people, living in ashrams and monasteries. And I guess that's where I found my calling. And at the age of 21, I came back to London and I said, Mum, I want to become a monk. You can imagine what that felt like for my parents, and it was a bit of a shock, but I had to follow my calling. And 25 years later, I stand before you still living as a monk, still learning. I come in front of you not as someone who has all the answers, but perhaps I can share something with you of what I've learned along the journey, and that's what I'll try to do today. Before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment just to offer a Sanskrit prayer of gratitude. As we know, gratitude is the mother of all qualities. When I became a monk, one of my teachers said the basic equation that we all need to correct in our life is that we undervalue what we have and we overvalue what we don't have. And sometimes just taking a few moments to reflect on how much we have received and how beautiful our life already is really helps us to look at life in a different way. Once a group of friends went to New York. And as they arrived in the Big Apple, they checked into the penthouse suite on the 80th floor of the Hilton. They checked into their room and they were pretty satisfied. They looked out of the window and saw the beautiful view. And they said to each other, let's go out and explore the city that never sleeps. And so they came out of their room, they went down to the lobby, and they started exploring the sights and sounds of New York. After 8 hours, they arrived back at their hotel at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And they had the fright of their life, because as they came into the lobby, they walked up to the lift, and it said, lift out of order. Now, when you're in the penthouse suite on the 80th floor and the lift's out of order, it's a problem. They said, what to do? We have to bite the bullet. And so they began walking up the stairs. After about 10 flights of stairs, they said to each other, maybe we should start telling each other some stories. This could be a long journey. And so they started telling each other stories. They got to the 70th floor and they said to one of their friends, you haven't told any stories yet. Why don't you tell us a story? He said, my story is tragic. He goes, no worries, tell us. He said, my story is that we arrived in New York. We checked into the penthouse suite on the 80th floor. We went out. We came back. The lift was out of order. So we started climbing the stairs. We're on the 70th floor, but we left the key in the lobby. At that moment, they were about to throw him out of the building. Rising, rising, rising. But have we left the key to happiness somewhere behind? It's interesting, in the world today, we're increasing technologically. We're increasing in entertainment and conveniences. We're increasing in so many facilities, conveniences, and comforts. But the crucial question to ask is, are people happier? One young girl, she writes a beautiful poem called The Paradoxes of Our Time. She says, we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. We have wider highways, but narrower minds. We buy more, but we enjoy it less. We've conquered outer space, but we're struggling with inner space. We've multiplied our possessions, but we've reduced our values. We have more degrees, but less sense. We lose our health to get wealth, and then we spend that wealth to try and get our health back. We're more connected than ever before. But perhaps we're further and further apart. These are the paradoxes of our time. And so, a forum like this, where we can come together and really discuss what does it mean to live a conscious, meaningful life, and what can we do within our positions of influence to share that message with the whole world. A discussion like this is incredibly powerful. I was recently at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we were doing different leadership seminars there. And at one seminar, one person was relating that in American schools, 50 years ago, you know what the 3 biggest problems were? Chewing gum under the desk. Come on, you've all done it. Cheating in exams, and talking in class. The 3 biggest problems in American schools 50 years ago. The 3 biggest problems in American schools now: physical assault of the teacher, teenage pregnancy, and gun crime. Maybe we've advanced, but in another sense, we've regressed. All the wisdom teachers across the world will tell us that along with multiplying our external material conveniences, if we don't simultaneously promote spiritual values, there will be an imbalance in the world. At the World Economic Conference, the talk of the town was artificial intelligence and the effect that technology is going to have on the world that we live in today. And perhaps in such changing times, they say the world will perhaps change in the next 5 years as much as it's changed perhaps in the last 50 or 100 years of the past, because change now is exponential. And therefore, the need for wisdom, the need for spirituality, the need for ethics and values which help us to ground ourselves in a more conscious way of living is perhaps the greatest need of the day. We're here in a room full of books, and monks get really excited when they get, this is what gets us going, you know. They say small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, but great minds discuss wisdom. And so here we are in a room full of books of wisdom. And perhaps these books of wisdom are needed more than ever before. One English writer says, if you want a new idea, then go to an old book. Because ancient teachers have very, very deep principles which can help us in every facet of life. In the Hare Krishna movement, amongst the various books of wisdom that we refer to, the body of knowledge is known as the Vedas. Veda literally means knowledge. And therefore, the ancient Sanskrit texts and that body of knowledge are so vast that they don't just contain spiritual knowledge, but they can contain insights which can help us in every aspect of life. If you want to know how to find your purpose, there's something there. If you want to know how to avoid burnout and have balanced lifestyle, the information is there. If one wants to understand how can I upgrade my relationships and really connect to people in a deeper way, the insights are there. Everything we could conceivably want to understand in a profound way is available in these ancient books of wisdom. And therefore the Vedas are books that have been referenced for generations by the greatest thinkers, not just religious people, scientists, politicians, change makers. The Bhagavad Gita, which is considered the essential book within the Vedic body of knowledge, has been read by many, many famous people over the centuries. Einstein once said, when I read the Bhagavad Gita and reflect on the vastness of the universe, then everything else seems so superfluous. Nelson Mandela, he also read the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, when he came out of prison after his unjust treatment, someone offered him a Bhagavad Gita. And he said, no, I already read it in prison. And the person looked at him and said, what did you learn from the Bhagavad Gita? He said, what I learned from the Bhagavad Gita is that the day I walked out of prison, if I didn't simultaneously give up my negativity, my bitterness, my anger towards the perpetrators of my suffering, then even though walking free from prison, I'd still be in prison. Such powerful insights read by eminent people over generations. The Bhagavad Gita helps us to approach life perhaps in a counterintuitive way. Sometimes in life we tend to go into autopilot and we tend to pursue things and do things without even sometimes thinking. Once a teacher said to all her students, I want you to draw what you want to be when you grow up. So one child came forward and drew a picture of a pilot. Every other kid wants to be a pilot. Another kid came forward and drew a picture of a teacher. Another kid came forward and drew a picture of a mechanic. And the final child came up. And as that child put her piece of paper up, it just had a circle with 2 dots and a smile. And the teacher said, what do you want to be when you grow up? She said, this is what I want to be. The teacher said, what's that? She said, I want to be happy. The teacher said, you didn't understand the assignment. And the kid looked at the teacher and said, you didn't understand the purpose of life. Sometimes just taking a step back to review our approach to life is very, very powerful. And today, our topic is paradoxes of our time. And in the next 10-15 minutes, I'll just share with you 3 of the paradoxes which our ancient scriptures talk about, which may and could, and we're actually confident, can transform people's lives. And then what I'll do is I'll open it up and I'll be really inspired to hear what your thoughts and reflections on the paradoxes of our times are. Thank you so much. The first paradox of our time is what I call the information paradox. When I was at university, the degree I studied was information management. And now we live in a world in which we're bombarded with information. They say the average human being in this world processes 70 gigabytes of information every single day. Our mind is bombarded by so many things. One of the monks once said to me, first we were nowhere, and then we progressed and we got somewhere. And then we had technology and now we're everywhere. But because we're constantly on our devices, we're always elsewhere. And because we're constantly elsewhere, we're practically nowhere. Constantly drowning in information. The ancient scriptures tell us the first paradox we can think about is what we call the information paradox. Sometimes the less information you consume, the more informed you might find out you are. The world we're living in today is just constantly about eating and eating more and more information. But there's value in stepping back, trying to understand what are the quality sources of information from whom I should take serious wisdom or knowledge or information or data. And instead of just taking in more and more information, what we also need to do is spend time reflecting, introspecting, digesting, processing that information. The Vedas promote an approach to life which is more reflective than simply about obtaining and accumulating more and more. And so the information paradox tells us that if we can, as a society, encourage people not just to consume more and more information, but to rather be more selective about quality sources of information, and then with that information spend the time to reflect, introspect, and go deeper, then actually they might find that consuming less information makes them much wiser and much more informed about life. Another paradox of our time is what I call the speed paradox. We share with people that sometimes by going slower, you can actually end up reaching your top speed. What we tend to do nowadays in the world is as soon as we jump out of bed, we just go straight into top gear, because most of us are usually playing catch-up. The speed paradox tells us that every single morning when we wake up, if we take the time to first go slow, to turn the attention away from the outer world, but first to turn the attention on the inner world. As the sun is rising, the monks, part of their lifestyle is to rise with the sun. The sun is the source of all energy in the universe. And it's said that one who rises with the sun also becomes energized with creativity, with productivity, with longevity, because they furnish their inner world before dealing with the outer world. So one thing we're on a campaign to do is encourage everyone to join the 5 a.m. club. And we tell people you have to join the 5 a.m. club before you join the 9 a.m. reality. Otherwise, it could end up the 12 p.m. catastrophe. Going slow can sometimes help us to reach our top speed. Because when we take time away from the world to refine our intention and realign ourselves with our highest priorities and principles, then what happens is we end up emerging in the world in a much more purposeful way. And so this is something that we share with people, that going slow in a world today which is moving at breakneck speed is sometimes frowned upon. But actually those people who really take the time to disconnect. Another thing we share with the world is every year try to disconnect for 1 month. Every month try to disconnect for 1 day. and every day try to disconnect for 1 hour. Because that disconnection time, although it seems to be taking away from your productivity in the world, what you'll actually find is that disconnection time gives you an inner edge, which allows you to then re-emerge in the world with greater impact and power. The speed paradox. The slower you go, sometimes helps you to reach your top speed. There are many more paradoxes I could share with you, but the final paradox I'll share with you today is a more powerful paradox and perhaps a little bit more of a scary paradox. And that paradox is a paradox which many wisdom teachers talk about. And that paradox is known as the death paradox. And the death paradox is that the more we meditate on our mortality, the more we may end up finding we live a much more purposeful life. In the world we live in today, we almost live in blissful ignorance of our own mortality, that we all have a limited amount of time in this world, that time and tide waits for no person. When we were monks, one of the mornings we came in for our Monday morning class, and the teacher said, "Today we're going to do a meditation." So we were all like, "Yeah, let's do it." He said, "This meditation may invoke some emotions within you." So yeah, no worries. Today, the monk said, "We are going to meditate on our own funeral." We were like, "See you later." He said, no, be with me. And then what he did is he fast forwarded us, and in a meditation, he took us to the day of our funeral. And we visualized the crematorium, all the people who love you, all the people who grew up with you, all the people who you shared so much with had gathered. And then at one point, the person who knew you best came up to the podium and began to give the eulogy of your life. And they grew up here, and they went to school there, and eventually they ended up doing that job. And like this, in the meditation, we began writing what we would want the person telling the eulogy of our life to say about us. And it did bring about a lot of emotions, because we realized that sometimes if we meditate on how we'd want to be remembered once we leave this world, it helps us to realign ourselves with our highest priorities that often we can forget. And so the death paradox tells us that when we realize we have limited amount of time in this world, that we just live with greater purpose and sense of contribution. Steve Jobs, he once said, "When I wake up every day, I ask myself, if today was the final day, would I be doing what I'm doing today?" And he said, if the answer is no for too many days in a row, then I know I need to change something. He said, death is life's greatest change agent. Like this, there are many paradoxes in the world. Today I shared a few of them with you. We live in a world which is moving in a certain direction at a high speed. And counterintuitive approaches to life given by wisdom teachers and wisdom literatures can help us to craft a more healthy, healed, and happy world. And really, as the Hare Krishna movement, that is what we're trying to share. We try to share it in different forums. We have schools that we go to now. We even have schools that we've begun where children can learn these principles from a very young age and grow up to be real conscious change makers. We have communities where people can come on the weekends and the evenings to really bolster their spiritual consciousness. And then we go into government organizations, we go into the corporate world, we go into universities and other places and try to share this wisdom with people. Because the greatest need of the day today is wisdom. Because coming back to the first story I shared with you, we can be rising and rising and rising in so many ways, individually and collectively. But along with rising, if we don't simultaneously imbibe deep spiritual principles as a foundation, then we might find that it's a case of a life that looks good on the outside, but doesn't feel very good on the inside. It could be a case of smiling faces, crying hearts. It could be a case that the operation was successful, but the patient died. And that is each one of our responsibilities to try to make that improvement in the world today. And that's why universal spirituality, found amongst all the wisdom traditions of the world, presented with creativity, compassion, clarity, and non-sectarian motivation, that kind of contribution to the world is absolutely necessary. And we thank all of you for organizing this event and being such a support for us to do that, because we believe that together we can really make the world a much brighter and more beautiful place. Thank you so much. If anyone would like to share a reflection or a question or any thoughts that come to your mind on the paradoxes of our time.
That was truly wonderful and a really nice way to spend an hour of lunchtime just reflecting and hearing such wisdom. And it certainly is going to make me change the way I do some things. And I don't know if I'll get up at 5 a.m. I have good intentions, but I think it's so right. And that month of disconnecting, I've just had that, and it has made the world of difference to me. And I think the day. A month is a good thing to live by as well, and the hour a day. It is very hard to find it in some jobs, but I do think you're right about, making your purpose more clear, because we spend a lot of time doing stuff that's not important. It was very, very well timed, I think, to come into February thinking, how am I going to do things differently? So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And just to reflect back, Stephen Covey, in his book about 7 habits, he tells the story of the woodcutter who had a new job cutting trees, and so he was enthusiastic, and at the end of the first day he cut down 20 trees. And at the next day he wanted to impress the boss even more, so he started working even harder. But by the end of the day he found he only had cut 18 trees. And so he thought, what's happening here? The next day he decided to work even harder, and then he found he only cut down 15 trees. And at the end of the day, he was exhausted and crestfallen. And one person came by and said, what's the problem? He said, I don't know. I'm working harder and harder, but I'm producing less and less. And the person said, but did you take the time to sharpen your saw? And he said, sharpen my saw? I got work to do. I don't have time. The person said, some things are so important. It's not about having time. It's about making time. And he said, you can work harder and harder and harder, and you'll become more and more ineffective because you haven't taken that time to disconnect. So just to reflect back.
Thank you so much, Swamiji, for your very insightful guidance and 3 very important paradoxes. I'm Rakesh Raizada. I'm part of Vedic Global, and I'm closely associated with Hare Krishna movement. So I understand Gita and read that for getting answers. And yet I've not come across Gita doesn't have any answer to any questions humans can have. Yes. So I'm a fan of Gita and try to recite every day and meditate every day getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So because of very many parliamentarians are here, I raised this at various forums that prevention is better than cure. So if you will see that Indians rising in top positions everywhere in the world, so their background, something is there which make them so. So if we change our moral values and teach moral values at school level from very beginning, things may change. And same way, yoga, which has now India has brought it to the world. If we practice yoga, a lot of medication problems can die down, and governments may save a lot. I'm a perfect example. Saved 4 operations just by pursuing this yoga and meditation. And these insightful talks should be spread more to educate people. Thank you, Swami.
Thank you so much, yeah. And just to reflect back on that, I was just recently at, where was that? That was JP Morgan, yeah. And I was doing an event with some of the executives there. And we identified 3 things: growth, progress, and success. And what we were discussing is that in the world today, people conflate all of those together. So they think if they're growing, then they're progressing. And if they're progressing, then they're successful and happy. And what we actually talked about is how those 3 things are connected, but not necessarily the same. We shared that when you grow, that's wonderful, but only when you grow with character, integrity, and values does that growth become progress. And you can progress, but until and unless that progress is used in contribution to other people to craft a better world, unless that progress is used for the betterment of civilization, it doesn't really bring a deep fulfillment, a sense of success or happiness. And so it's not just about growing, but it's about growing with character and value. And it's not just about the progress which comes from that, because that progress then has to be used selflessly in service. And we talked about how when that complete cycle is done, then it really leads to a much more fulfilled life. So, thank you.
I absolutely loved your insights, but I have a question. Gita definitely helped me to find the calling, the purpose of the life. But my question is, how do you bring in this balance between, let's say, a purpose and priorities, right? Purpose, let's say you clear, you want to do X, Y, Z for the world. But priorities could be, managing family, your work, your career, earning millions and all of that. It could be anything. So how do we bring in that balance? And what's your thought? I just wanted to kind of ask that question.
Yes, we have a purpose, and then we have the priorities and the responsibilities of life. And both need to be juggled and balanced. And what we share with people is that both components need time, both components need energy, and they are not mutually exclusive, and one doesn't replace the other. In other words, when we have stability, when we focus on our immediate responsibilities, then it opens up the opportunity to look at the finer elements of purpose and what I'm meant to do. And when we find our purpose, and when we live more in line with our nature and our abilities and our innate talents, then what we'll find is that it becomes much easier to also do our responsibilities. And so the idea of the Bhagavad Gita is that you can actually pursue both simultaneously. And if you pursue both simultaneously, what you'll actually find is that one feeds the other. It's not that your responsibilities take away from your opportunity. Thank you so much for coming. It's not that your responsibilities take away from your opportunity to find your purpose. And it's not that your purpose takes you into the clouds whereby you forget the world. But you can actually do both side by side. Thank you very much. Thank you.